know who England are playing.
Neither do I. I don't even know what competition they're playing in. But
is it Albania? Yeah. No, is it?
Could be Albania. Is it a couple of minnows? But either way, I haven't even seen anything in the press. I can't actually believe that hasn't come up yet. But I'm not that excited about it.
I don't know about you. I'm massively disappointed when I see it's International Week coming up because it means Premier League's not on, and I'm like.
Well, Premier League, match of the day, all the things that I can say, I'm busy, I'm doing this at home, I suddenly can't now because the International Week doesn't really excite me.
My weekend. Come on, Neil, here we go.
It's not even telling me.
Even Sky Sports isn't bothered.
Even Sky Sports are bothered about who England are playing, which is quite amusing. It's a bit poor, isn't it, that we don't actually know. I think it is Albania. I'm just trying to figure out.
I've got to say, it's probably the first time that I can remember over the last couple of years where Sky Sports News or BBC Sport or whatever aren't actually reporting anything. There's just nothing there, which is actually, like you said, Steve, a bit of a godsend.
Andorra, and it's a World Cup qualifier.
Is it?
Really?
And it's on Saturday at 7:45, and none of us are interested, which, considering it's, So we're going to win, but how many? And how many's Sterling going to score, and how many's, Kane going to score? I think, to be fair, he's Phillips is injured, isn't he? So he's brought Ward-Prowse in. That's the only one that I'm thinking, I'll be interested to see what he does.
What, sitting on the bench?
Well, he might even not get a game because Henderson will probably play. But he's, who else has he brought up? I don't know. He's brought a few different players in that he's trying out, isn't he? But he's kind of
What's it about? Anyway, John, enough about football.
Really?
So, welcome to everybody. This is the first in, hopefully, a series of variety of spectrum around tomorrow's workplace today, because that's really what we as a company deliver. So we've got some very experienced guys in the room that are going to talk about their experience of working with businesses and what that means in terms of tomorrow's workplace today. So let's start the conversation then. I'll start with Mr. Wells. So tomorrow's workplace today, when I say those words, what does that mean to you?
I guess the first word that springs to mind is flexible. So I guess in the last 18 months, a lot of businesses have had to change their processes, change their procedures. They've had to deal with people working from home, working in the office, this sort of hybrid culture. And it needs to be flexible. So people need to feel comfortable. The owners of the businesses need to know that the staff are actually doing a good job, that they're actually, doing what they get paid for. But then we need to be helping the staff use technology so that it doesn't matter where they are in the world, they can actually do the job. And that, for me, is kind of what technology is all about. It should help us, be the best we can wherever we are.
Be as effective as you can, whether you're in the office, at home, on a train, at the airport. You can have access to what you need when you need it.
Yeah, but loaded question, because we're sat in the office and I'm looking out the window, there's loads of cars in the car park outside. So COVID, touch wood, is hopefully declining. Is everybody not just going to flock back into the office and we go back to 2019? And
it's interesting you say that, because the customers I've spoken to and in different industries, I think they are really struggling to get people back into the office, especially full time. Actually, people are leaving work and they're actually saying, well, hang on, especially from a digital perspective in terms of developers and things like that, like the people I've spoken to, if it's more than 2-3 days a week, they're finding other jobs because they know that other people will pay them and give them the flexibility that they want.
And I think for me, there's a couple of things interesting. The big outage recently, Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever, Facebook are now saying that their UK employees have got to spend at least 3 days in the office because they're blaming it on people being working out of the office, which I think is a really interesting sort of take on that outage. But I think for me, it's around the fact that I'm seeing now job adverts. I'm not looking for a job, Steve, but I'm seeing job adverts where it's one of the key things they're highlighting is hybrid working.
Yes.
Work in the office for a couple of days, work from home 3. We're flexible. They're really trying to sell the difference, which, pre-COVID, Steve and Neil, 2019, it was a number of companies that we would have gone into that were very much, we all work in the office. And then, as you said rightly, Neil, suddenly it was a case of, right, we need to react to what's happened. Everyone has reacted and they found that the world's all right using technology. It's just some companies are a bit slower to get to benefiting, if you will, because they're still a little bit like, oh, we got through it, but I still quite like to use paper.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few months, because definitely the workforce has got used to working from home and the flexibility that provides. But also, we've been working back in the office for a few months, and there's benefits of that as well, and that kind of water cooler conversation that you don't get when you sat kicking your dog in your living room, typing your laptop. It's interesting, going to be an interesting dynamic to see what people do and how businesses react over the next few months with that.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to sometimes personality types, obviously industry sector that you're in. So I'm finding that people that are quite techie, that are maybe coders or developers, they like their own space. They like to be sort of headphones on and concentrate on stuff. And whereas the creatives of this world, the marketeers and other people that I've seen, they can't wait to get back in groups, and that they really value that sort of workshop environment. And to be fair, we do as well. We're social people. We like to get in front of them. And it was really good today to actually get out and about and actually go to my customer's site and see people again. And it made a big difference, because the remote sort of working, to a point, logistically it's been really good for me, because I'm actually dealing with people. It's opened up my remit to deal nationally now, as opposed to in terms of regionally. But then at the same time, you do miss that little bit of extra, connection and empathy and other bits and pieces. Or just when we did a site audit today, it was visually being able to see stuff, was like, what's this? And it prompts questions, which was really good.
I think sorry, Steve. I think that's really interesting, because I've noticed, much the same as you, but I've noticed that as you rightly say, our reach has broadened, and we're now, length and breadth, and east to west, etc. But actually being able to go into someone's office or plant, and actually, as you rightly say, use your eyes. From our perspective, you can find other areas that probably are problems that need solving, that on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting you don't see. So technology is brilliant to get in front of someone, because people are probably more open to having a half-hour Teams meeting rather than making space for someone to come and visit them. But I think that actually having the ability now to go through someone's front door and actually say, what happens there? Yeah. Oh, do you know what? That's a real problem. Actually, it goes back to the hybrid working we were talking about earlier. The hybrid sort of dealing with companies, I think, is the future, because if you can open the door and then get through the door and see what they're doing, I think that's where we can add more value, isn't it?
Definitely. Because every business is different, isn't it? And every business will have those quirky little processes, those areas where they're using documents where potentially they don't need to be.
Yeah.
But it's being able to join the dots for them, being able to say, actually, you've got a filing cabinet full of paper there.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So you have different customer base, you're speaking to people, customers, businesses every single day. If we jump forward 2025, tomorrow's workplace, what does that look like for you then from your conversations?
From my conversations, it very much is around the continuation of this hybrid working, but more around getting as much out of their staff as they can, but using other things rather than just making people work harder or employing more people. It's about actually saying, right, where can technology enhance what my current staff are doing to make their job a more enjoyable, but I think B, deliver more value to the department or to the business. So I'm talking to people, and I'm getting requests for meetings around how software can help from a reporting perspective, from how we can sort of take paper out of the administrative sort of process, so that actually if it needs to be paper, can we sort of scan it, and can we let software take the journey of that document further? Because in the end, that document becomes data, doesn't it? And then once you can use that data, it becomes a very powerful tool for that company. So for the conversations I'm having, and we all talk in very different sectors. It's not one particular sector. It is very much around where we can add efficiency, add automation to those mundane tasks, and it be it sales, be it finance, be it operations, good team.
I think it links to that what we discussed earlier around the colleague engagement and people wanting to work for businesses, because there is a demand for talent out there, and actually one of those things is hybrid working. The workforce want that. Another thing is they want good systems, they want modern technology, and if they haven't got modern technology, then that is a barrier for a lot of good talent.
And the interesting thing is, just to reiterate that, I've actually been in and sat down with an IT manager, and he actually told me a story where literally it became a bit of a running joke. It was like a revolving door where every single week he was having to set up a new username and password for a new person, like in the finance team, and they were coming in and they couldn't believe how outdated the processes were, because again, the shiny facade of the business thinks, oh yeah, this is a really big company, they should be ahead of the game, but getting under the skin and actually sat there to do the job, it was so archaic in terms of the paper and processes. the recruits of the ages and the generations they were from, they were thinking, well, hang on, I could just get a better job down the road and they pay me the same money for doing a more automated job, so it's not so boring and mundane. And it links interestingly to a couple of conversations that I've had with MDs and business owners, where especially family-run businesses, where they've actually started to look at it from a health and well-being point of view. And I've had two MDs say recently about their son or daughter have been in a very admin role, and it was so mundane, he actually feared for their mental health. And again, I know that's been in the news quite a bit, but it all has a knock-on effect, and health and well-being has been put into the spotlight, as well as financial implication of the pandemic. So not only is businesses are really scrutinising the data and the reporting and seeing financially how the business is performing, so they want to make sure that they're as efficient as possible, but then they've got a duty care to look after the mental health and well-being of the staff and make sure that they're not only safe when they come to the office, but mentally engaged, and again, it's a job that they're going to get something out of it. So, and keep talking about freeing up their time so they can add value. So it's like, okay, so what does that look like for you, as opposed to just shuffling paper and entering data? It's like, we've got robots for that. It's like,
exactly. And I've found when I've been going out, and talking to some of the sort of older professions, if you will, law firms, accountancy firms, they're struggling to keep hold of the new generations, if you like, simply because they've been educated using technology, and then they move into their career, and then suddenly it's back to pen and paper, and they're like, well, hang on a minute, I've been writing essays and dissertations and doing all my research using laptops and powerful softwares, and then suddenly I've got to start pen and it's just the conversations I'm having, it's very much like, we need to up our game to enhance our, as you rightly said, Neil, our employee sort of experience when they're at work, so that they're not feeling like, it's the world's, sort of coming in on them because they're going back to the dark ages. So, and I don't think it's just those two professions, really. I think very much, you only got to look at the NHS, how they reacted during COVID, from being very sort of antiquated in their processes to suddenly, in not much time, things were being done by video. My mum had a number of appointments which were meant to be on site, and suddenly it was all done very quickly. So I think that's actually, if something the size of the NHS can change in a short space of time, because it had to, I think maybe smaller businesses, that are of the gigantic size of the NHS, maybe shouldn't be so scared to consider technology.
But I think, just to pick up on what you said about big corporates, and there's a perception that it's kind of everything works seamlessly under the bonnet, and you're right, it absolutely isn't the case. And lots of big businesses that are held together with spreadsheets and bits of paper, and that's often because they've got big legacy systems as the backbone of those businesses, and they're difficult to replace, and they're expensive, and they take time to replace. And I think actually that gives SMEs a real opportunity to be on the front foot, because they are a bit smaller, a bit more nimble. They can get a competitive advantage if they start to invest in technology earlier. I think we see that with a lot of SMEs that have taken that advantage.
You just see some of the fintech businesses that are creating an app for a specific thing, and they're just getting funding, and their market valuations are going like this because they've found a problem, solved it, and then they've been able to take it to market and scale it rapidly. Whereas obviously the big companies, ultimately the big companies like Google and they just buy them once they get to a certain point, and like obviously Facebook did with WhatsApp and all the rest of it. But the bit that I found interesting, like you say, it's that change management piece. So it's forced certain businesses to accelerate their change or to adapt. So we've mentioned video conferencing there, and again, NHS or whether it be the legal sector. And I remember speaking to a big accountancy, and they're forced to embrace like digital signatures. Before it was all wet signatures, we have to have this contract. And he was like talking about a deal that he was doing with a business in Australia. He was sending paperwork off in the post and waiting for it to come back, legacy. Now they've jumped onto digital signatures, and all of a sudden they can get a contract signed in an hour or whatever. They're doing a video call, they've got the contract signed, they've been able to massively improve that. But then it's just that whole, it's all right. It's a bit of a shock realization, and then it's like, okay, so how do we take it further and take it on board? But I was talking to a colleague of mine when we were driving back, and it's kind of that whole change management piece when you're actually introducing new technology to a business. How do we sort of make it smooth transition? I think there's a bit of a thing around. Normally people would expect to come into a classroom and be presented, or this is the new way of doing things. But again, variety and flexibility. People can go online now. They can record a webinar, or they can record a Teams call that we've just done and view it back. And I think that's going to help massively for when we do our new deployments, so people take things on board. We've got multiple ways for the people to learn that new system. It's not a case of, oh, well, I was off that day, and can you show me your notes that you've written in your book? It's like, well, actually, we've recorded the Teams call, or we've done this, that, and the other. And it's a bit like people are now, over the last 18 months, they're doing like online courses, they're doing Teams calls, they're used to consuming data and information in a different way that they normally wouldn't do. And they're actually finding that wow, my life's getting better, and I've been able to, instead of being afraid of change, and it's that whole, and I think historically we've been probably struggled with that. We've sort of developed and delivered a solution, but maybe not being great at the change management piece. But I think moving forward, especially with the recruits we've got now as well, with Amy and the like, it's kind of, that piece can be a lot more streamlined and scalable.
Yeah, I think it's making people feel part of the journey. It's interesting when we talk about automation, probably people's natural perception is that automation will just replace people, and it's a negative thing for talent. I think that's absolutely not the case. A lot of our discussion so far has been about actually good automation augments the talent that you've got in a business, and it makes them happier, it makes them add more value in areas where they should be adding value. And I think making people part of that change journey, and if you take them on it, they understand it, they understand why you're doing it, and they're much more likely to kind of adopt the technology. I think we've learned that over the last 12 months, definitely.
100%, and just to add on that, it's something that's a bit topical for me, and kind of something I don't really talk about externally, but this month is sort of Dyslexia Awareness Month. So, and there was a study done by EY that talked about the workplace needing different ways of people thinking, and also around how people consume information and how people connect. And dyslexic people are generally more empathetic and can connect with people. So if you can take away all the admin bit that I'm rubbish at, automate that, free me up to talk to people and have more conversations and add value that way, all of a sudden it's accelerating change. But there was a study again by 2025, I think it was something like 75% of most mundane processes will be automated.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's a bit like, okay, so what are the humans going to do? And like you said, there's a bit of fear around that, thinking, well, okay, well, what do you do in normal life? What do you do in you have conversations with your friends, your family, we're humans, we're designed to sort of interact and help each other and overcome problems. And if you look at every business, they're in business to solve a problem. Doesn't matter what you are, you either provide a product or a service, but it's ultimately, we're freeing up humans to add value to do that again, or to think differently, to grow Because otherwise, like you said, we're going back in time. If you look at a lot of the processes that businesses have done for 100 years, it's like the industrial age of just putting people in rows and factories.
Yeah.
When you look at Tesla or whatever else, they've got these amazing robots in the shop floor, but we forget a lot of the time about the back office. And in my manufacturing customers, all they're focusing on is getting the product made as sufficient as possible, and they're all Six Sigma and lean. And then the paperwork is, again, it's a bit like that swan analogy. The paperwork bit sometimes lags behind, but then if you can automate both, have a really brilliant, smooth operating business that's ultimately profitable, putting people in jobs that are looking after people's health, and
You're right.
It goes around.
You see manufacturers where they've got robotics in, it's working brilliantly, warehouses where it's all streamlined, and then you step back, look at the finance function, the HR function, operations, and actually it's lots of paperwork.
Still pushing paper,
spreadsheets. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that was an interesting fact. Well, it's 75% of
by 2025, which isn't long away. They're saying the prediction by Gartner is saying majority of
75%
are going to be invested into automating mundane processes.
Yeah. So if you're a business and you're not looking at mundane processes and how you automate them, then it's highly likely that your competitors are. So
Yes.
you need to be on the front foot, because you're right. 2025 is not long away.
And ultimately, you're right, because commercial business, it's always the most profitable, most efficient businesses win. So ultimately, the ones that are lagging behind, they'll go out of business. It's as simple as that.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because what we're saying really is that if you adopt automation or methods to streamline how you do things, and not necessarily by introducing software, you're making the business more efficient. And the number of people that I am talking to, and I'm sure that you're the same, but where they're like, there's always 4 or 5 things on their to-do list that they don't ever get to do during a working month. And it's like, I don't do the statements in finance. I just get the supplier invoices, complete. And then if I get to the first 4 or 5 suppliers, and what we're saying is that we can make you and your department more efficient to be able to then do all of those things and then be proactive. And as you rightly say, Neil, add value and say, right, let's be more strategic rather than reactive. Let's be proactive. And I think that's where automation is going to fit into this piece. And if you think that 2 years ago we didn't have a pandemic, and just shy of 2 years, and now and we're talking in 3.5 years time, suddenly that is going to be fact.
Yeah,
that's scary.
So we're talking about automation at a high level, but when we're talking about automation, then so what do we mean? What are we looking at? What type of technology? Bring it to life for us a little bit in your day-to-day conversations.
Yeah, so the day-to-day conversations, so the people I'm mainly speaking to day-to-day are sort of finance directors, IT directors, that are mainly looking at how to use technology to replace the mundane sort of data inputting or shuffling of data from one system to another, where historically they would print something and then they would have to key it in over here. So it's a bit like, how do we get data from there to there without a human being involved? And the classic process for us is more around things like accounts payable. So again, someone buys something, the invoice comes in, it's generally being emailed. But I even remember when I first started here, people used to still print them and put them in the envelope and post them. And it still happens to a certain degree, but then a lot of ERP systems that just distribute the invoices, but it's created the bottleneck the other way. So from an accounts payable side of it, they just get emails every day. They're having to open it. They're having to make sure it ain't going into junk and all this type of stuff. Press print, and then they're sat there collating them all, matching them to delivery notes, stamping them, coding them, all this type of stuff, and then keying them in. Whereas really, we've got multiple technologies, whether it be OCR technology or RPA, so robotic process automation. It's going to monitor an inbox. It's going to scan the PDF. It's going to match it to an order. And it's going to, if it's all matched, it'll just push it around and it'll go through a digital workthrough and it'll get a ping on a mobile. Again, a director could be working from home, could be working from anywhere. You've got an invoice, you've got a notification, invoice to approve, clicks a link, sees the PDF, presses approve, done. And whereas that other process would have been a paper invoice, left on his desk, got lost under the pile, what's the implication of that? Well, you haven't paid your bill, and you've got someone ringing you on credit control, you've now pissed off your suppliers, so your supply chain's got a bit edgy. And again, worst case scenario, you've gone on stop, or you get fined for being late payments and all this stuff.
And the production line stops.
But it happens, and quite scarily, it happens to some of the bigger businesses, especially if you think about throughput and volume. They're processing thousands of invoices. The likelihood of things going missing and accounts being accidentally put on stop, and the implication of, like you say, not being able to get the parts, or not being able to actually produce the goods that they need to get out the door, or a service might stop, or again, it's
I think it's fair to say accounts payable is kind of the prime process for automating, certainly within the finance function. But I guess more and more businesses have invested in that over the last few years, certainly over the last 2 years, because of what's happened.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, I'm seeing areas more in sort of sales order processing or in the HR environment. And I remember helping a client sort of automate the processing of sales orders. And they were going through stages where, large orders, 5-figure orders were falling through the net. Mm. And, they were kind of like unaware until the client rang up and said, "Where's my order 1, 2, 3, 4?" And they'd be like, "Where is your order 1, 2, 3, 4? We'll come back to you, Mr. Customer." They look at it, it's in someone's inbox, it's been overlooked because everyone's so busy. Mm. And then suddenly, as Neil rightly said, the knock-on effect, which I think for me, a lot of businesses either ignore or don't recognise, is the cost to catch up. So we've now got to push back our production plan to squeeze this order in. We've got to pay overtime for that. We've got to maybe get rush materials in, which in the current environment, you don't want to be having rush materials because you're paying through the nose for that, or you can't even get hold of it. So by introducing software that can monitor, as Neil said, from the supplier side, but can monitor orders coming in and can say, right, I can now take hold of this. I can then make sure that the sales representative knows. I can power things to to production, to whatever. Ensures that you've got an efficient and streamlined process at the admin side, but then when it drops down to the production element, actually the production manager and the production planners, they've just got a stream of work that's going through. And you mentioned Six Sigma and Lean and all of that. I'm sure when you go through the whole process of looking at that, it starts at the very, very top, and without software, you're relying on people. Well, I'm suffering with a cold at the moment. We're all got ailments at the moment, and you're not necessarily always on your game.
Yeah.
So we work at, what do? We always work at, we work things out at 70% efficiency or optimization. Well, software can work at 100%, and it can work 7 days a week. It doesn't stop for Christmas, Easter, or whenever bank holidays. So that's for me where I think customers are starting to recognise that. Do you know what?
Plus, in industries that are quite cutthroat in terms of because I'm doing a lot in stockists and distributors and things like that, and really the customer can go to anyone. And what I mean by this is they expect the order. If they place an order, they want it the next day, or they want to click and collect.
The Amazon effect.
The Amazon effect. And if you can't provide that fast turnaround, and again, like you say, if you've got a telephone order and someone's having to key it in, and then someone's going to have to pick it in the warehouse, the other person could have arrived. The customer could have arrived by now, waiting downstairs to actually get the goods, or if it's not dispatched on time, is it going to get delivered? And then really, are they going to come back, or are they going to go to your competitor down the road type thing because they've got the click and collect type experience or the delivery type experience?
It's amazing how many customers or businesses that we speak to have invested in that technology for accounts payable. That OCR, being able to extract a document, read a document, workflow it. And then, you look at sales order processing, and that's still processed manually. And it's essentially the same process, just backwards, same technology used.
And
it's a quick win.
And if you think about it, Steve, actually, a lot of companies are looking to automate the area, or are looking or have looked at the area where they don't actually get any benefit apart from they pay their suppliers quicker.
Yeah.
What we're saying in the sales order processing side of things is process it quicker, you'll get paid quicker, and you become more profitable.
Yeah.
And then I was, while you were both just discussing that just a second ago, I was thinking, actually, if you think about sectors that have adopted technology that you probably wouldn't necessarily think straight off the bat they would, courier. It was the Amazon effect that you said that triggered it in my mind. You think about the fact that now Sainsbury's deliver my shopping at the weekend, and I have to sign on that, and that then clears it up on their system. And the number of things, I know you've got customers that do the EPOD, just areas where it used to be a clipboard, sign here please sir, and then you go back and then someone had to enter that onto the system to close it off, to send the invoice, etc. All these things that companies could benefit. And actually the last one that I 10 years ago would have said would have been the one to adopt it the soonest is the courier delivery sector. But hey, it makes a heck of a lot of difference, and the returns that they must be getting must be through the roof.
You do find with automation, once you start talking to a business about it, you get one use case, you get it in, and it very quickly spreads around the organisation, whether that's in finance, more in finance, or in HR, or in logistics, or operations. It's just everywhere you look in a business, there is an opportunity to automate the mundane.
Yeah, because ultimately, all the businesses that we tend to talk to, but pretty much every business has some form of, having to be audited, be it a finance audit, or be it a health and safety audit, or be it an accreditation audit.
Customer audit.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in retail, BRC, and all those audits, the companies that I go and talk to that haven't adopted software, they've got piles and piles, boxes and boxes of documents where people have done startup checks or they've done quality checks, and then suddenly said customer says, oh, actually, I'd really like to see, when you were making this product for me, your checks. And they then spend 2 days, which they don't think is anything, but if you think about the real cost is, to go and hunt a couple of sheets of A4 paper. Bonkers.
Yes.
The other thing, as soon as you've digitized a lot of those paper processes, it becomes data and it becomes valuable. You can straight away. I mean, it's something that we always talk about. You capture it, you digitize it, then you can report on it, and you can see the results real time, as opposed to waiting for paper to get back, someone to file it, someone to data input it, and then if you're always making decisions on things that are 4, 5, 6 weeks out of date, you're miles behind. You need to be, and I get it that there is a big push to try and get real time, and there's certain scenarios where certain reports, maybe if your business doesn't move that fast, it might not need to be real time, but at least 24 hours or the next day or whatever. And I think data's not going away; it's only getting bigger. And what I'm finding now with companies is kind of it's having those system generated reports, but because they have multiple different systems, and I was going to touch on that, in terms of where we help people a lot is where there's a legacy system, or there's a new system, and they might have a HR, they might have a payroll system, they might have a manufacturing system, or whatever. It's moving data or linking it all together. And historically, the best way of doing that people knew how to do it was print a document out and put it in a file or pass it around. Whereas now we can, again, even with whether it be robots, with the really legacy systems that don't have any integrations, but most systems now have APIs and that type of thing. And the modern ones are built to integrate, because we realise that not one system can do everything. So we buy best of breed, and we try, and that's where we kind of come in to try and be that glue to sort of pull it all together. Because ultimately, what we're bothered about is the information that's on that piece of paper. So we digitise it, we've put it in a safe, secure way that can be audit trail and can be retrieved easier. But then ultimately, we give them the data to senior leaders that actually make decisions. And if they're not making the decisions real time, you can see with some bigger businesses, ultimately are going out of business because cash flow runs out, they've made the wrong decision, the wrong hire, or whatever.
I would say we've seen a big change in that in the last 12 months with finance directors. 12 months ago, 18 months ago, we were talking a lot about automation, and we still are, but actually increasingly I think finance directors are saying, I want information, I want insight, I want to be able to make better decisions.
Considered decisions, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a trend that we've seen over the last 12 months.
You've got to think, that data's kind of, we're moving into the crypto, we're in the crypto, currency sort of environment now, and data is a currency. And you've only got to look when you want to go on a holiday. If you keep going on to the same website, suddenly they're like, aye, that particular,
They can track everything, can't they?
yeah, they can track it, and then suddenly your price is going up, and that's just using data to enable profitability in essence. And that's where, as you rightly said, that's where people are slowly getting there, but getting there is that using the data that's theirs within their systems, but using it in a profitable manner to either push the business forward or make decisions that aren't going to cost the business money.
Yes.
Be it hires, be it actually, do you know what, this supplier, they're not, evidence is suggesting they're not the most efficient in, delivering the product or the quality of the product, or actually, do you know what, they keep putting price increases and yet their invoice is the most expensive to process. But it's all data that as a business senior leader could say, do you know what, I didn't know.
They want the answers at the speed of thought. So they want to be able to think of a question, ask the question, and be able to click around the screen and get the answers, as opposed to I'll just speak to so-and-so and he'll run a report for me, but how does that have an impact on this? And then it's a case of, I'll run another report, and it's like, hang on.
And the moment's gone.
The moment's gone. But
I'll put a request in for a report, and
it'll
come back in a week. And that's that kind of instant. We live in that world of instant information, don't we? You can pick your phone up and Google something, and information's at your fingertips. And I think we're used to that in the modern workplace as well. We should be.
I agree.
So in terms of the benefits, I know we've probably not got long left, but in terms of the benefits that you see from automation when you're working with businesses, what are those kind of 2 or 3 big benefits that you see come through?
For me, one of the key bits of feedback I generally get when we implement our solutions into customers is actually, and I'm talking a very broad age range here, is actually employee engagement and employee satisfaction in actually they're enjoying their job more because actually, yes, it's become easier, but it's allowed them, as we touched on right at the beginning of this chat, it's actually allowed them to do more things that probably are a bit more taxing on the brain, that they leave at the end of the day and go, do you know what, that was a bit more challenging today.
Yeah.
And bar none, that's probably the most feedback I get, is that the employees that were struggling, that were a bit bored and a little bit like, I'm just doing the same old, are now actually coming into work with a bit of verve and a bit of focus and a bit more like, actually, you know what, and
more engaged in what they do.
Absolutely, but actually, to the surprise of our contacts within these customers, they're like, do you know what, I would never have guessed that it would have turned out like this. I could see all the benefits, John. I could see why it was the right thing to do, but in the back of my mind, I was always worried about Tom or Jane or whoever. And actually, they've really taken it on, and which is important for us because the users are very key.
Yeah.
But actually, they've taken it on and they're thriving, and they're now coming to me saying, "Can it do this? Can it do that?" And we touched on how it's one area benefits and another area says, "Well, I want some of that."
Yeah.
But for me, the benefits that I'm seeing is more around the employee engagement and satisfaction of actually doing something.
When you talk about the financials, because a lot of the time the ROI on these types of solutions is second to none. It's brilliant, but actually a lot of the time it's hidden financial benefits like a reduction in late payment penalties or improved rebates or early payment discounts. Certainly when you're talking about AP, they're probably not the sort of benefits that you see straight away, but actually once you get automation of accounts payable in place, then you do see a lot of that coming through into the P&L.
Even linking those two together, like you say about staff engagement and things like that, because the opposite is they're not engaged and they leave, and then you've got staff turnover and the cost of keeping staff happy, attracting good staff, that type of thing. That's a cost to a business. It's a massive cost.
Yeah.
I was going to say the biggest thing that people are sort of saying to me is efficiency, but when I drill down into that, it's like, okay, so what is it that you want? They want time, and this is by automating tasks, it allows you to buy back your most valuable resource, which is time. And then it's a case of the next question: what are you going to do with that time to add value? And then it can open up a myriad of things to take it down different avenues. But simply for me, it's we allow you to buy back time.
That's when it gets into more of the information. You got time, and we can provide you with better data, and you can use that data to be more proactive more strategic, add value to the business.
And you're right, and it's a spiral up as opposed to a spiral down, because you've got more time, you can be more proactive, you can find better ways of working, and again leads it to more efficient ways of doing things. So ultimately, service your customer better, be more profitable, and increase the business. And every business wants to be around for as long as they possibly can, 100 years plus type thing. So
let's just ask the last question in terms of, what is the next big thing for automation? I mean, you've already said sales order processing is probably the thing that you're seeing the most of.
Yeah.
Neil, for you, is that the same, or is there anything else actually that is starting to gain traction and you think?
Yeah, I think I think you're right. That is one process. I think the technology that I'm quite intrigued to do a bit more is more the RPA, the robotic process automation, because I think once you've got the robot in and the tool, and you get the engagement from the staff that they actually like it and it's actually providing value, I think the scalability wise, I think enterprise level, like everything, the top enterprise level businesses are using it. It'll then start coming down to SMEs. The price will become cheaper. It'll just become second place, second nature to actually be using it. So RPA is going to be interesting to me the most.
I agree. I think it's been around for a while, but as you rightly said, Neil, it's been more at the enterprise level. Whereas I'm excited to bring it to our SME market, because I think we've got some really exciting plans as to how we can make it, just you don't have to have it all the time. You can come in and drop in and drop out with it. So I agree.
I would second or third that actually. I think RPA, especially for SMEs, where it's just those little processes where somebody comes in and half a day a week they're spending doing this routine task. I think they're the perfect ones where RPA, you can just get rid of that half a day a
Literally
week.
press a button, run a routine, and it's got the action. And while you make a cup of tea, it's doing it in back by the time it's done. And as a kid, like you say, instead of then being a robot physically, just copy and paste, and rinse, repeat. It's like, well, they're the perfect type of tasks that you. And then, ironically, when you start looking, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
Absolutely.
Excellent. I think we'll call it a day, shall we?
Okay.
But thank you for that. I think there's hopefully an interesting conversation. So if you want to get in touch with us, I'm Steve Motley. I'm the head of digital at IT Spectrum. I'll let Neil introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Neil Wells from IT Spectrum, one of the digital automation consultants.
Yeah, John Benoon, digital automation consultant as well. I think between the three of us, we can absolutely help you with any of your requirements.
So get in touch on LinkedIn, or alternatively www.itspectrum.co.uk and get in touch with us there. And we'll see you again for the second episode. Thanks, guys.